Packers fans out here to stay. Cheeseheads green and gold all day. Jordan Love lead us to the bay. Every game we find a way. Green Bay hustle, grind it up. Hit the field, we don't bluff. Touchdown dances, feel the love. Jordan's got that MVP stuff. It's time for all, let's go. Packers bringing that show. It's time for all, you know. Green and gold gonna glow. Lambeau Field, our sacred ground. Feel the vibe, hear the sound. Packers fans so loud and proud. Jordan Love, he's wearing the crown. Lambeau Field, our sacred ground. Feel the vibe, hear the sound. Packers fans so loud and proud. Jordan Love, he's wearing the crown.
Aloha and welcome back to another episode of the Ohana Packers Edition podcast. Today we continue our pre-draft preview episodes. We go through quarterbacks with Steve F. And Steve, I am leaving your last name as F because that's how you have it on Twitter. We'll let you dox yourself to your own heart's contents, but it will not be our fault. But
that's
Steve,
fine.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us today.
No, my pleasure. Thanks, both of you, for having me. Good evening to you, Joe, and good afternoon, Mike. About 6 or 7 hours behind me.
Yep.
Unfortunately, I'd love to make this all Back to the Future and tell you something that's about to happen, but nothing works like that, so. But thanks for having me. It's awesome.
Well, you can be like that AI guy that seems to be taking over TikTok with a storm that claims he's a time traveler jumping to these different points in history, and yeah, it's all AI vid. But yeah, Steve, it's great to have you on. We were kind of talking about this before recording, that Jim Wickens, the draft professor, has really kind of built a community, and it's been kind of nice to, when it comes draft season, to have that pool of draft guys to pull from and get information from. Because I mean, I'm reading stuff in the thing that in the chat that it's like, wow, I don't think I could have found that anywhere else.
I know, it's wild. Some, the boots on the ground that some of these dudes have, it's pretty cool. And, the fact that we could share it with each other and keep it on the down low where appropriate, it's cool.
Awesome. So, So, as I said, we're doing quarterbacks today.
This is our final week of positional groups.
Woo!
Save the best
next week
for last.
is our final draft, or final mock drafts before the actual draft, but this is our last positional group to break down.
That's right. It is the last weekend before the draft in Pittsburgh. But as I mentioned, we have Steve on today to talk about quarterbacks. Packers roster. So obviously the starting position, they are set at quarterback. They have Jordan Love returning, locked in for the next, I think it's 4 years on his current deal. I always forget what the structure is. He's been knocking on the door of MVP contention the past couple years, and really the biggest thing for him has just been health the last 2 seasons. We've seen him take a leap in his game, in his play on the field the last couple seasons, and it's just a matter of staying consistent in his upward trajectory. It's the spots behind him on the roster that are more of a mystery, because Malik Willis, who the team traded for 2 seasons ago, in the waning moments of preseason in 2024, went on to literal greener pastures, signing a nice free agent deal in Miami, following Jeff Hafley and John Eric Sullivan out down to South Beach. And the Packers have, for all intents and purposes, they have no real answer at the backup position behind Jordan Love right now. And that's what makes it kind of interesting, because it's opened the door to more trade speculation, because it's like, are they going to do what they did with Willis? How feasible is that? But also, it does bring up the, how important is the backup position, all that. But like I mentioned, Jordan has missed some games here and there the past few seasons, and if the Packers were forced to go down that route, if the roster stood as is, you would have the likes of Kyle McCord and Desmond Ridder waiting in the wings, and both had experience starting in college, but neither is a household name in the NFL. You're a little more in the weeds of a little more in the quote unquote hardcore college fandom to know who either is at this point. But yeah, that's where the Packers roster stands right now. Joe, we said we wouldn't touch too. There's not really free agency talk. Did you want to do the trade talk ahead of time, or?
Well, I want to do kind of like we did with Destin last week, and since Steve is an outsider, quote unquote, of the Packer universe, just kind of get what his thoughts are of where the Packers are sitting with the quarterback room. So, Steve, what do you think of the Packers quarterback situation right now?
All right, so full disclosure, I'm coming here as a New York Jet fan. So, of course, I'm going to infiltrate this space because I got to get my scouting done for when we trade for Jordan in about 10 or 12 years, right? It started with Brett Favre in 2008 and then Aaron Rodgers in 2023. So, we got to keep it going. This is really, me getting in the weed stuff. But yeah, all kidding aside, again, I'm a Jet fan. I listen to your quarterback room. I'm like, what are you worried about? Um, but yeah, Mike, did a great job breaking it down. Obviously, there's Jordan. You do have him, under contract for a bunch of more years. We know the stats and what he could bring and what he's been able to do. And I guess it's now 6 years. Obviously the first 3 or 4, he was learning behind Aaron, and then behind him you've got Desmond Reed, who they picked up. I mean, I think he's on his sixth team, right? He was drafted in 2022 for
Technically second according to his career stats. Falcons 2 years and then Raiders 1.
yeah, well, but he's been on some practice squads and waivers and they drop him. But either way, he's been around, right? Since Arthur
Yeah.
Smith and Terry Fontenot drafted him back in 2022 out of Cincinnati. And he was, I think, he was not a name I was really following. We were in our second year with Zach Wilson. I wasn't really closely looking at the quarterbacks. And then, he kind of lit it up at the Senior Bowl, started gaining a little more attention. So instead of watching Sauce Gardner on the defensive side of Cincinnati, started flipping over to the offensive side. I think he went a little bit higher than I thought he was going to go. I had him down, pretty much a fifth round grade. I think if memory serves, he may have gone third, maybe fourth. I don't remember.
Third round.
Yep. And then I guess I don't know if Ritter will be year two or McCord. I'm presuming it'll be Ritter, but I actually really liked McCord coming out. He went later than I thought he would. I had a pod with Benjamin Albright, and we were thinking maybe third round to the Cleveland Browns. But anyway, he wound up going to Philly. It didn't work out there. So, I mean, I think if we go and we look at the history of Packer backups, there's maybe a sense of comfort because are either of these guys, let's focus on Ritter, are either of these guys necessarily any better or worse than guys you've had in the past? I don't think so. But there's certainly always area, whether it's maybe a trade, I don't really see it, or you look at, some of the names coming out, that there might be opportunity for Goody and LaFleur to upgrade the room.
Yeah, Ritter is the interesting one to me, just because former third round pick, all that stuff. But he's sitting in the kind of the same boat that Malik Willis was. Came in as a, I don't want to say highly touted. I mean, Malik was a little bit more highly touted because there were talks of him going in the first round that year. But kind of spoken about a little bit more, and floundered, really looked like wasn't going to do anything. But then LaFleur put him kind of through his quarterback school, and now we're saying, man, I wish we had Malik Willis back to back up Jordan Love. because that's what the kind of player that we got out of Malik out of it. So Ritter kind of fits the boat a little bit more. I will say this, I don't know much about McCord other than a friend of the show, JJ Leahy, absolutely despises Kyle McCord for some reason. And I'm not sure what the reasoning is behind it. I've never really flat out asked him about it. But I just know anytime, that's kind of like a curse word for JJ. So I don't know too much about him. But and Mike will jump into it here in a second, or we can just go ahead and go for it now. Obviously, there are a lot of rumors about what the Packers possibly could be doing. I mean, they've been linked to Anthony Richardson. I think there was a little bit of rumors that they were linked to Justin Fields, but I think Fields signed somewhere.
We actually traded him. Yeah, we traded him to Kansas City for,
That's it.
A pack of barbecue or something. I don't know what it was. Yeah.
But they've been linked to, and that could just be recency bias with what they did with Malik. There are some guys, they have been linked with guys in the draft that we'll talk about here in a bit too, but the one name, not draft-wise, trade-wise that I keep bringing up, and I know I get eye rolls from it, is Will Levis down in Tennessee. And the reason, and I know people are saying, oh, well, Tennessee's not going to make that mistake again, whatever, the rumors are that he's out. They're gonna, the whole time during the draft, they're gonna be shopping him. So whether they trade him, where they release him, whatever. And the reason why I keep bringing it up is the one key thing that I kept seeing when I was looking at quarterbacks in that draft was they kept comping him to Jordan Love. Well, if you've got it, and honestly, I don't know, because I'll be honest, when 2020 came and they drafted Jordan Love, I was like, what the hell's going on here? I didn't do any research on first round quarterbacks, so I didn't, because I was like, what, I really doubt that's going to happen. But then smoke turned to fire, and they really love Jordan Love. Anyway, back to Levis. I've heard a lot of comps or not heard, but read a lot of comps about him being similar to Jordan Love in play style. Well, if that's the case, what better way to do it than bring him into Green Bay, let him learn under Jordan, let him get coached up by the same coaches that, other than Tom Clements, that coach Jordan Love, and see what he can do. But there's a lot of links there. Mike, can you think of any other ones that the Packers have been linked to? Like I said, I know there was Richardson. I know there was Fields. There was just the tiniest little nod to Kyler Murray, but I don't think that was ever going to happen. But I know there was a couple others. I just can't think of the names off the top of my head.
No, I think the big three, like you said, I didn't really buy too much into the Murray talk. The big three of Richardson, Levis, and Fields, Richardson and Levis, they fit the mold of the Willis deal where they've got a couple years left. They both, technically they both have a couple. Levis has a couple, and then Richardson would technically be able to pick up the fifth-year option, which they wouldn't do because they're not paying that for a quarterback like Richardson when he's been he's had a lot of struggles as a pro, and they're already paying Jordan Love. But what's like you talked about with Levis, yeah, there was a lot of comp between Jordan and Levis when Levis came out of college, because same sort of build, athletic for the position, big arm, accuracy and turnover questions, and I joked that Goot and LaFleur showed they have a type at quarterback, and that's why my long-running joke was that DJ Uiagalelei would be a Packer because he fit the Packers quarter. And people were rolling their eyes, but I'm like, if you look at the guys that those two have been linked to, Drew Lock, Jordan Love, Will Levis, Uiagalelei fit that mold too. He's a 6'4" and above guy, 220 and above guy who can move, run the ball some, and who can move, run, and throw on the move. Has a big arm as anyone, but has questions about his long-term accuracy and how good he's going to be about taking care of the ball. But yeah, like it, and I don't think it would take much to get Levis because the Titans, as they should be, are invested in Cam Ward's success and his upward trajectory, and Levis. I don't want to say. Okay, wait. I don't want to say he's a luxury, but he's not getting any playing time there unless the worst happens to Ward. So, very similar. He got taken around earlier than Willis did by, ironically, the Titans. But at the same time, it's sort of the same thing where they are again ready to move on, and the Packers are potentially looking for options at that spot. But until there's any real movement or any more smoke, I feel like a trade won't happen until after the draft because the Packers will have said like, hey, we didn't get the prospect we want. We're not pleased with what we've seen out of McCord and Ritter in training camp in preseason. So, basically it would be a repeat of the deal that got them Willis, where it's like, okay, what's his face? Why can't I think of
Clifford?
Clifford, thank you. Clifford just hasn't improved. Pratt just disappointed as a rookie in training camp. And yeah, so just, okay, our plan A didn't work out, so it's time to go to plan B, and plan B worked out well for all sides. Well, I'll say for the Packers, both in terms of their return and Willis in terms of, improving and continuing his career in the NFL. And in a weird way, you can say that it helped the Titans because they figured out that, their Levis wasn't going to be it, and they needed to find another solution, and they lost their way into getting Cam Ward, who does look like a legitimate NFL pro. So, take that as the long way around to say, yeah, I can totally see them making a deal, but the Richardson one, I don't see it because the cost is just going to be too high, and you have all the question with his eye, his shoulder, his I think it would be one thing if they could just sign him outright in free agency kind of thing, but because you'd have to trade for him, I think that complicates things, and especially because because Daniel Jones is coming off his Achilles tear, they have questions at the position. There's a outside chance Richardson is their starter at some point in the first month of the season. I just, they're going to try and gain back some of the sunk cost or, on their return on investment. So that's where I do think
you're going to drag the corpse of Phillip Rivers back out again and let him go.
He re-upped his NFL insurance policy, health insurance, and now it's a matter of restarting his Hall of Fame clock. But it would be hilarious.
I want to throw this out there real quick for the Titans. They also have somebody that both the Packer fans and Jet fans know a little bit, Mitch Trubisky, as the backup. And not that he's this tremendous quarterback or whatever, but he's going to at least give you a little bit more than what you would think Will Levis is going to get, because he's going to have that veteran presence to help Cam Ward grow. And then I didn't realize this, but they have Hendon Hooker too, but Hendon Hooker's 28 years old. I didn't realize he was that old. So I was thinking, oh yeah, they got Hendon Hooker to be that third string, groom him in case something happens to Cam Ward, but there's no grooming that when Will Levis has been in the league a year longer than him and he's 2 years younger. So, but with all that said, Steve, what do you think about any potentials that the Packers that are out there the Packers could make an offer for?
I like what Mike said about, maybe, putting some feelers out, but maybe not making any kind of decisions until after the draft. I don't really see, not only for a sense of what Indianapolis would want in terms of draft capital, but, I don't see a fit with LaFleur, and what he likes to do. Yeah, Richardson, is there an arm there? But, there's at least a little more accuracy with other guys that the Pack have had, and I don't see that. I do think Levis is an intriguing thing. I mean, I think you guys probably know that, since 2019, when LaFleur got hired, he and Goody definitely have a type, right? They're not going to be looking at a Diego Pavia, right? They have their thing. And actually, Malik was almost an outlier when you look at the height because, other guys 6'2, 6'3, 6'4, 200 something, 211 to 225. It was kind of like, there's that meme that goes Packer, pointing the finger, and so I think Levis is kind of intriguing. Certainly, you look at, he does have a strong arm. There is, a decent amount of accuracy. The problem is the consistency. He is athletic. So, he's certainly an intriguing option. I think the thing is, we saw a couple of years ago, a lot of these 2021 guys, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, Trey Lance, they were getting traded for, pennies on the dollar, right? I think it was pretty much a 6th round pick. So, and then the only thing I would say about Levis, who didn't have as much starting experience as Mac Jones or Zach Wilson, is, remember, he's coming off, we don't know what the story is with that shoulder. I mean, we're
Right.
assuming he's going to be able to continue his career, but I mean, have we seen the medicals? Have we heard anything? So, I mean, if I'm Tennessee, you really want to get rid of this guy because clearly Trubisky is going to be your two. And like, you guys said with Hooker, I actually liked Hooker coming out of Tennessee, but, it is what it is, right? It happens. And you mentioned the age, but I would see if they'd be willing to take like, you know, a 7. I don't know, offhand outside of not having the first, your first pick is 52. I don't know what, your array of picks looks like, but, I may
Next year looks a
say,
lot better for picks. There's
yeah,
there's a lot of them. So if they do what you guys are saying and wait until after the draft, that obviously will be the draft pool that they'll be pulling for. They've got a ton of picks at next year.
yep. And look, I mean, so that's certainly one option. I mean, yeah, it is a different group of people now in Tennessee. It wasn't the same GM that traded Willis. Obviously, Bob Sala's there and Brian Dayball. But Mike Borgonzi, making the call. Who knows if he's going to stamp out? It's certainly an interesting option, but I'm sure we'll get to it. There might be some intriguing, day three. I look. I don't think you're going to invest pick number 52 in a backup quarterback, right? I mean, maybe I just jinxed it into existence, but I think there
You
could be,
never know with the Packers.
it's hey, maybe it's the color green or something. We never know, but I think there will be some intriguing options that are going to be there. I mean, it's not exactly the biggest wow quarterback class. I mean, Fernando Mendoza, and then there might be a couple of guys that go on day two, because that's the way it is with quarterbacks. And a lot of guys will be there day three. I think you're going to find a bunch of intriguing options, maybe even as PFAs or UDFAs. So I think you could be very measured as far as not moving too quickly, with Levis. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the only quarterback that I saw that you guys did a 30 visit with may have been Texas Tech. I think it was Baron Morton, who I don't really think fits your mold anyway. Maybe, they brought him in because they're looking at somebody else on Texas Tech and they wanted to, grill him a little bit.
Yeah, I've been going to this a lot lately, but Easton Butler has been doing a tremendous job tracking the Packers visits, and the top 30 visits, yeah, Baron Morton is the only one that they brought in for quarterback, but throughout all the other stuff like pro days and the combine and that, they've been meeting with a lot of different quarterbacks. But I just remembered the one that I was thinking of because Steve brought him up, and being's the Jet fan, it never clicked. But I have heard slight rumblings. I don't know if that's fan talk or what, but that maybe they need to bring in Zach Wilson to.
He
to
got
be
signed. He's in New Orleans
Oh,
competing
really?
with Spencer Rattler. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but that was something that I had heard rumblings on. But Mike, is there anything else you want to add in, or do you just want to go ahead and jump into draft talk?
No, I think we've beaten around all the bushes at this point, and we can just get into the draft. Yeah, I, as Steve so eloquently brought up for us, I do not see us using a day 2 pick on a quarterback this year. Just too many other answers around the roster, and Jordan is way too young, and the injuries he's had, they aren't the kind where you look at it as like,
I don't know,
ooh,
man.
maybe you gotta
Remember
start.
back to what year was it? The Jordy draft. They had Rogers. They had Rogers there and started for a couple of years already, and then they drafted both Brian Braum and Matt Flynn.
Or Flynn.
Braum
Yep.
was a second rounder.
And I do think I think an element to that was, so that was going into Rodgers' first year as a starter, and I think an element there was Rodgers had been injured every year he had been on the Packers from the moment he was drafted to then, and they were like broken foot, hamstring, I forget what the one, his second, or because I think it was
The collarbone. The collarbone was later on, right?
Yeah. No, he had all these like weird lower body injury, like minor, like soft tissue, or like the broken foot one was like the most ironic one because it's like he goes into a game after Favre gets knocked out of the game, and then he plays the rest of the game, breaks the foot, and it's like, oh. And I do think there was the element of, oh, like, we think he's good, but also, what if he's just never going to stay healthy for a full 16-game season? And I do think that was a driving factor behind, like, okay, Braum, we just think is too valuable. He slipped into the second round, and Flynn, falling all the way to round 7, and the irony there about how those two worked out. But, like you said, Joe, though, never say never, but I do think that it would.
Think about it. You kind of mentioned it when we were talking Jordan a little bit ago. He hasn't been healthy the first 2 seasons as a starter. And I'm not trying to say, oh yeah, they need to move on from him or anything, but I have said this before. Look at the parallels between Rodgers and Love. Both taken as first round picks when they had an established starter. Both set behind established starter for 3 years. Both, new head coaches, new, haven't been healthy the first couple of years as starter. There's a lot of these parallels. Now, again, I do agree. I don't see 52, but again, you can never, and maybe it's a trade down situation where they pick up an extra second, or, they move back, pick up a couple extra picks, and, there's, I don't know, Ty Simpson sitting there, or somebody that we'll talk about later, Cole Payton, or something like that. But anyway, that's just conspiracy Joe coming out.
Excuse Joe for putting on his tinfoil hat, Steve, but
There you go.
let's get into that point of the draft where the Packers have picked up a couple extra day 3 picks between this draft and next draft. With the Dontavian Wicks trade they just made with the Eagles this past week, and I know a lot of people have jokingly said like that's the ammo they're going to use to like move up if a Chris Johnson or someone falls into the second round and all that kind of stuff, but the way I also potentially look at it as, okay, you get into that late day 3 range and you start to see some names, like one that Joe mentioned, he's not a favorite of mine, but like if a Ty Simpson happens to be around at the end of round 3, or if, let's say they're like higher on a Taylon Green than a lot of other teams. Who are some names in that late day 2, early day 3 range, Steve, that you have taken a liking to as prospects and could see teams, like the Packers potentially moving into position to take in that late round 3, early round 4 range?
Yeah, I think that's a good question because like I said, this year it's really hard, to identify where these guys are going to go. I mean, there's a lot of chatter about Ty Simpson going in round one. I don't really see it happening, but stranger things have gone on. But, to your point, Mike, there are a lot of guys, that are really intriguing. Um, you know, uh, if I just start thinking about going back to what I said before about a size profile, there are a bunch of them that do fit. If I look at, from the athleticism, then that starts eliminating. So, like Garrett Nussmeier of LSU, I would venture to say he's probably in that 3, maybe 4 range. I could be totally wrong, but, he may be a little bit on the shorter side than the average guy they take. But the athleticism just doesn't jive for me there. Drew Aller, I mean, you want to talk about a guy, with a prototypical, you think of the quarterback, 6'5", 220 something, 228, I think. I mean, for size and what that arm strength is, that would be a fantastic fit, but he's not athletic. I don't see him coming in and, even in an emergency situation, certainly not in the 2026 season, where if I'm, the Packer staff or Packer fans comfortable seeing Aller, possess the athleticism outside of the arm necessary to, help you out, a game or God forbid more if something happened. Um, with Jordan. Carson Beck is another name. I think that could be round 4, maybe even round 5. You know, uh, we don't have the testing numbers and things, the sizes there. I don't even know how much juice there is in that elbow because there were moments I saw in the championship game or throughout the playoffs. When he had, he was hitting Tony and whatever. It's like, okay, the boy can still spin it, and then other times, whatever. But whether it was you, Joe, or Mike, I forget who, I think a really intriguing option is Arkansas quarterback Talon Green. I mean, everybody knows how big this dude is, right? 6 foot 6, 220, I think 227. I mean, the blazing 40-yard time, 4.35, 4.36, something like that. So he checks the box for, what LaFleur and Gutekunst have liked in terms of the build, but that athleticism is just off the charts. Now, does he have the arm talent? I think if we go back and look at Malik, I think Malik had a better arm. Okay, there's a lot more to question. He had the superior raw arm. It was almost effortless. Just the jaw dropping velocity and everything. I think Willis had, the ability to get the ball out at different arm angles. I don't know that Green has that at this point. So I would certainly maybe, get rid of McCord and bring I think traditionally you guys keep 2. I don't think you keep 3. I could be wrong. But
It's usually 2 and then 1 on the practice squad.
okay. Well, then, that's where you get, I don't know then, in that situation, because, if you draft him, somewhere on day 3, he may get picked right away off of the practice squad. He may not make it there. I don't know. But, Green, he's got that longer sidearm kind of motion to him. But I just think from the athlete standpoint, he's a really intriguing fit for you guys.
Yeah, I didn't really watch him too much to know the arm strength and all that stuff, but I have heard talk that if he gets drafted, it's do they see him as a quarterback or do they try to, do the tight end thing with him or the tall, what do they do with him? But I do think the Packers have met with him. I was trying to go through I think it was at one of the, one of the showcase bowls or whatever that they had met with him. But honestly, the Packers have done a lot of research on guys, and it's funny that you mentioned that Diego Pavia may not be fit the mold, but they actually met with him at the Senior Bowl, so it's crazy to think of that. But just a couple other guys that you mentioned, Aller, I do agree with you that his arm strength is amazing. There were a couple of throws that, because I was watching a little bit of him before we jumped on, that it was like, wow, because it just seemed like an effortless throw, but it went 40, 50 yards. It's like, okay, yeah, and he had pretty good placement with it too. Athleticism, yeah, I don't know what's there. Obviously, the ACL tear is going to be a hindrance for him a little bit too, so that'll be a little bit interesting. You did mention the top 30 visit for Morton. He's also lacking a little bit with the athleticism if you go off his RAS, so it is kind of interesting that they talked to him a little bit, but he's another one that it seemed like his arm strength was pretty good, and he had some pretty decent placement with his throws. And I want to look at my notes here real quick. I thought he had, what was it? It's not like he's got like top size, but he's got like average size, so it wasn't amazing. His deep throws looked pretty good. I mean, there were some times that it looked a little bit lofted, but that could have just been throwing on the run or whatever. The one knock on him that I really had for him, and it just happened, there was one game, and I can't remember which one of them I watched, that he started drifting a little too much. Instead of staying in the pocket, moving around the pocket, he just kept drifting back and back and back. And it's like, my guy, I understand you got arm strength, but the further you go back, they're going to get you. And when they get you, you're going to lose a chunk of yardage there. But let's see, Neusmeyer. I want to get on Neusmeyer because I put this in Jim's chat group. I was watching a lot of him. I loved his release. It was a quick, short throw release, but I got to wondering about his arm strength. So you guys, if you could tell me what, at some points, like you were saying with Green, or was it Green or whichever one you were talking about, that Carson Beck, that was it, where it looks like he's got this amazing arm strength, but other times it looks like it's being lofted. Other times it looks like it does this weird tail off motion where it just kind of starts ducking and then falls flat. And it's like, okay, so does he actually have the arm strength or is he there? But other than that, everything pretty much, I mean, he had scrambling ability. They did their version of the tush push with him. So, he's got a little bit of a sturdy streak to him, and he had good placement on his ball. But what do you guys think about his arm strength?
Mike, yeah, you go for it.
Okay, so Nussmeier, I put him in the bin of he'll have a good NFL arm. Like, it's always hard to say because guys aren't asked to make the same throws in different schemes and stuff. But, LSU ran a little bit more of like a pro style-ish scheme. You saw him make some of the like deep outs, the throws downfield. He doesn't have an elite arm to my eye, but he can make all the NFL throws. As you noted, Joe, the time you worry about him is when his feet aren't set. The ball will, it'll lose some RPMs, it'll tail on him and stuff, which is, for outside of the elite arm guys, that's gonna happen. That's what's supposed to happen. I'll put it in terms of this. So the 2 seasons he's had in the NFL have shown that J.J. McCarthy, who at Michigan looked like he had the arm to make every NFL throw. But when you go back and watch his film, and what always concerned me is, like, he's a guy where he looked like a relief inning pitcher who throws 100, where when he really wanted to put zip on the ball, he's like leaning, like his body is leaning over as he's trying to put extra zip on the ball. Whereas with Jordan and, guys like Jordan, Mahomes, like a Dante Culpepper, even a Favre to an extent, it's like, oh, they'll just look like they're doing soft toss and the ball is there in a zip kind of thing. And, it's that easy gas that those kind of guys can put on it. I have Nussmeier more in the, like, he can put the sufficient RPMs on it, but he's not going to be a guy where you're like, okay, the ball is just going to fly off of his hand every time. Beck is in the, like, if we're doing a baseball pitcher rating, he's got, and it's not necessarily his fault, but after I think it was a UCL tear, so he basically had a pitcher injury. He basically has like a 35 or 40 arm, and I won't say they would have beaten Indiana, but he had multiple plays in the college football playoff where you're like, oh man, he had a guy streaking wide open, and the ball is either late where it's like a DPI instead of a touchdown kind of thing, or like it's a catch, but whoever is catching the ball is like, please, like, gravity, pick it, like, pull it down to, like, you can literally see the receiver, like, doing the thing where they, like up, down, because it's like, okay, there's the ball, but, like, where's that safety who's coming, who I beat 10 yards ago, where he's bananaed around and is seeking in on me kind of thing. And so, it is just that, like I said...
You went muted, Mike.
Yep.
Like, he had a comparable arm to Nussmeier before the injury, but you just see it on certain throws and what's really unfortunate for him is, like, some of these throws I'm talking about, he's hitting them, like, top of his drop on 3 and 5 step drops. So the throw is on time, and the ball just can't get further than about 15 yards downfield, and that's just not going to cut. Like you said, the frame is really good, the build is good, the athleticism is pretty solid for a guy like a quarterback with his kind of wiry frame, but that arm strength is just non-existent at this point. Like, Clifford has a better arm than him, and we saw what Clifford's arm looked like the couple seasons he was in Green Bay. Green, the reason he's high atop my board is because my belief has always been, for a backup quarterback, when you have an established quarterback, is I want the project guy who's got a good, like, he falls in the, like, teach him how to football bin in this sense, where it's like, he's got the big arm, there's questions about his footwork, his technique, his consistency, but if I have to throw him in, I can at least, we've seen an offense where LaFleur's like, all right, screw it, the backup's in, we're going to the wing tee with some option throws off of it, and you can survive that way, because that's the thing is, like, everyone's like, oh, don't you want a quarterback who can throw? But I'm like, that's the whole thing. They're your backup. There's, like, a minuscule chance where your backup is as good of a thrower, processor, knowledge of the playbook, having the relationships and chemistry with your starting pass catcher, the top-down things you need to be a successful passer in the NFL. It's very unlikely that your backup is going to have all that, and so that's where I like the backup to have a different plan of attack, so to speak, from the backup position, where, like, that's where a lot of Malik's success was. It's like, oh, this dude can throw it as far as Jordan could, but he can also take off and run for 60 on you, like, if and you saw it all the time, is like the first play he goes in, LaFleur is just calling a bootleg to see if, like, the defense is going to be disciplined, or if they're just like, just plaster everyone in man coverage, and Willis is like, and you can tell, he tells Willis, like, it's first read and go. If that first read, if that under leak tight end route isn't there on boot, just run, and just run for as fast and as far as you can. That's where Green is high on my list. And another guy who's high on my, like, yeah, I would take this guy. He's way further down because of his age and injury history, but Jalen Daniels out of Kansas is there for similar reasons, where it's like, not as good of an arm as Green, but, like, he has he kind of fits the Parcells mode. I don't know if you guys remember, but Parcells had that, like, 6-point list of, like, for me to draft a quarterback in the NFL, he must have these things, and it's yeah.
Parcells would have drafted Beck. I mean, if you go by that old thing, Beck is number one. Yeah, You're right on.
Yep. Yeah, so And like I said, that's where Daniels and Green are higher on my list in terms of why I like them as prospects, because I like having that different dynamic out of your backup quarterback, and then you can have your staff coach them along, and see what they have from a passing perspective. So, I say all that to get around to Nussmeier. If Nussmeier were to fall to the fourth, or somehow the fifth, I wouldn't mind if they took him there, just because the pedigree, his dad is like a longtime coordinator, so that between the ears he's got it there. And really the thing with Nussmeier is he just got physically beat up at times at LSU, and partly that's because they did ask him to run the ball, and partly like it's weird. Like LSU always recruits O-line well, but for whatever reason, whether it's because they play in the SEC or whatever you want to believe, their quarterbacks just always get beat up from time to time. And Nussmeier just, he's not, you know, Aaron Rodgers would say he's not short because he's 6'2" as well, but he's listed at 203. And there's times where I'm like, okay, he looks like he might be a little thicker than that. And then other times when he gets just lit up by not a guy you would think would be lighting him up, you're kind of like, oh, that's like a nickel linebacker who just exploded him in the, it was a blindside hit kind of thing, but you're like, oh, he kind of ragdolled on that in a way that I wouldn't expect him to. So that's where my concern is like, okay, like, is he going to be able to put on a little more functional strength and weight, and, what does he look like after that? So, but, like, when Flynn came out, I think Flynn was listed at, like, 207 or he wasn't a very stocky guy when he came out of LSU. So, they have taken those kind of guys, but it's just a matter of, like, when Nussmeier would be available. That late round 3, early 4 would be a little too rich for my blood, but if he got into that 5th round, I wouldn't have a problem with Nussmeier.
Yeah, that'd be, I think, incredible, value there. Just we were talking, we'll stay on Nussmeier a second, then I want to go back to Green and then throw another idea at the two of you. The strength, the timing, the ball placement, it's okay. Joe, I think it was you mentioned Favre. And, Nussmeier does have a little bit of a gunslinger attitude. It's just the arm doesn't necessarily back up that attitude. Right.
Right.
I mean, Far, he could just be like, all right, close his eyes, turn back and just go, F it. We're hurling this thing 70 yards. I don't think Nussmeier can do that. I think it's strong enough that he can challenge defenses vertically to a degree. But I don't know. There's a guy I do shows on Twitter with, and man, he is like the arm strength king. It's like nothing else matters to him. He gets a little ridiculous about it, but he would be like, "Oh, Lambeau Field, it's going to be cold and windy. You can't put Nussmeier there." Like, okay, relax, but so I don't know. I think the thing with getting back to Green, and then, like I said, I'll throw another thing at you. LaFleur's been around the block. He's come from a great tree. Baby Shanahan, Papa Shanahan. The principles are there. I think with a guy like Green that he would be able to figure it out, right? And you look at the things that Malik was able to do, and it was sort of having him, like you mentioned before, throw on a bootleg, not there, go run. I mean, who's going to want to try and challenge right away a 6'6" quarterback, right? I think, you get a couple of those things. Maybe, you build up some confidence in that short and intermediate game where I think the accuracy could be there for Green, and then, like the way the Pack likes to use the play action, uh, bad things can happen for the opponents, right? And maybe you're not doing as many tight condensed formations and whatever. But I just think, it's an interesting thing. But I we may have mentioned him at the beginning of the show. I don't remember. Another intriguing option is certainly North Dakota State quarterback Cole Payton.
Yeah.
I think the challenge being is, I'm left-handed. I didn't play the quarterback role. I was a receiver and a corner in high school and college. It's very different. So, you really got to see, what your line is, because obviously the right tackle now is your blind spot, and how your receivers, adapt to the way the ball comes. But then again, I don't think you guys have any more receivers. You're trading them all away. Bum. No, I did actually like that trade. You made Wicks to the Eagles. But, again, the size profile with Peyton's there, 1 year starter, but there's a lot of it factor to him, and I don't get into the comp thing, because I think, when we're broadcasting and engaging, the people that don't get into the draft weeds the way we do, they may hear a name and they're like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. He's not X. I'm like, well, we're not necessarily comparing him in the pros. We're comparing him when he was in college. Right. So I kind of stay out of the comp game, but, there were some elements of Josh Allen at Wyoming. Right. So, big physical, there, the accuracy concerns are there, but he's certainly an intriguing option also. If he's there, let's say middle of day three,
Yeah, Cole Payton is obviously a very popular topic amongst some of the people. Some of friend of shows like JJ Leahy and Jake Shavink are big fans of him. I watched him. I have to be honest, there's something about a left-handed quarterback that always fascinates me. And so watching him was amazing, because it always fascinates me, because you see the right-handed motions and it all looks natural and it all looks great, but then you get a left-hander throwing and it's like, what? But Cole looked good. I think he's got enough of the arm strength that, I don't know if it's quite Josh Allen like that with the arm strength, but he's got good placement with it. He had good receivers there that, helped him out with that a little bit too. Scrambling ability is top notch. I mean, obviously I'm looking at Raz. He had a 987 on his Raz score, so he tested out of this world. Decision making. Let's see what I got wrote down here. Athletic, good runner. I thought there was maybe a little bit of a hitch in his motion when he threw, but otherwise it was a pretty smooth motion. Good accuracy, good strength. So, I really did. And the hitch could just simply be the left-handedness of it all, but it just looked like he had this weird, whole go through with it that kind of threw him off for me. But it, like I said, JJ and Jake seem to think that he could even slide into round 2 of this draft. So, there's a possibility there. I don't know, but I do like Cole. I mean, he would be a solid pickup for the Packers.
Yep.
Yeah, he's gonna be one of those like, where does he end up going kind of guys, because like if he goes mid day 3 and like he goes to a team like Green Bay who can truly develop him, that would be one of the, I think, best case scenarios for him. Whereas like if he goes in day 2, he gets into that like honestly Malik Willis or Will Levis range where it's like you're like one game from starting, and I think that's a little too much pressure too fast for him, where he's like you said, Joe, the holdup I have with him is, and it's not a small school thing, it's like a big arm, not enough coaching thing with quarterbacks, where it's like, to me, he looks like a guy where, and I think this is where the hitch you're kind of seeing in his throwing motion is where when you get these guys who have big arms and then they're like told, okay, you got to start throwing with touch, the mistake a lot of them make is like, oh, throwing with touch means I throw softer, and that's not how it works. Like, if you look at the guys who can throw with touch, it's their throwing motion still looks the same for the most part. Like, you look at Rodgers, Favre, Love, guys who had like some of the biggest arms, and then it's like, oh, but they could also just feather the ball in, and it's not like, oh, they go from full wind up to throwing a dart kind of thing. It's like it's still the same throwing motion, but they know how to like lighten their grip on the ball, or like maybe it's the tech. Whereas like Cole, and like I said, this is a very prevalent thing where you see like his throwing motion, it does legitimately slow down when he's like, I'm gonna try and float this over a linebacker, or I want to feather this into the flat kind of thing and stuff. So to me, it's not a bad thing. It's more of like oh, okay, you're at that point of your development kind of kind of point of reference for Peyton in my eye. But like you said, he's got the big arm, brings that extra dimension of being a runner, is a tough runner. He looks like he's from like the 50s where it's like, okay, like, and he's going to have to learn, like, when he comes from Div 2 or Div whatever.
FCS.
FCS,
Yeah.
thank you. So like Div 1 AA. I always forget what the letter and number combination is, but he's gonna fall into that bin, kind of like Trey Lance did, where it's like, okay, like you can't run everyone over at this level. Like you're gonna get popped, even if he's like in a preseason game where it's like, oh, it's just the safety, and it's like that safety has put more pelts on his wall than you think he has and stuff. So, there is that learning curve for those kind of quarterbacks as well. But there's
I do
lot
think,
of,
though, when you're coming out of a school like North Dakota State, which is, pretty much like the cream of the crop of FCS, that's where, like, when I've heard somebody say, well, Josh Allen coming out of Wyoming, I mean, it's not like Wyoming is, this P4 perennial champion. So, I guess the competition level or where the school is in terms of stature is I can live with that.
yeah, I'm not super worried. It's just more there's some technique things he has to learn and tune up. And
Yep.
like I said, that's why I would feel much more comfortable taking him where I assume Green Bay would be taking him if they took him, which is like that round 5, round 6 range, as opposed to like a more quarterback desperate team being like, I gotta have this, I gotta make sure I get the guy I want, and a couple like that, and that's where that's kind of how the Packers got stuck with Clifford, is like there was this run on backup quarterback types in the 2023 draft, and everyone's like, oh my god, they took Clifford in the 5th round. But my counter argument to that is like, go look at the board and tell me what quarterback you wanted them to get. And a lot of what LaFleur and Gutekunst said after the draft was they kind of quietly admitted, like, yeah, we took one because there weren't many more to take, and we took Clifford because we're not concerned that he's gonna like battle with Love for the starting spot, but we needed a guy who was a 5th-year player. We knew he could pick. He had the matter between his ears to pick up a playbook really quickly, and could have the headset on and be a contributing part of our offensive system. Whereas this time, Ritter and McCord were with the team to close the season, so they've had a little more time to learn. They've both been around the league for at least a couple years at this point, so they're not even in that dire of a strait where it's like going into 2023, it was like there is no backup quarterback. It was Jordan Love and fill in the blank at that point going in. So they're already in a much better position there, and then it kind of is a pick your favorite at this point, and I'm really curious to see how this quarterback class goes, because that's the thing, and this will be my last talking point I bring up for the episode is, Steve, how do you feel like this class is gonna roll? Because Mendoza and Simpson are the two guys that Mendoza, because all the tea leaves seem to be pointing that he's going to be the number 1 overall pick at this point. Simpson, I'm not the biggest fan, but I can see him being the kind of like Mac Jones prospect that some team is going to be like, you know what, we saw enough in his one starting season, and the pedigree is there and all that kind of stuff, that we're going to be comfortable taking him. After that, I'm kind of like, these guys could go round 2, or they could go not till day 3 kind of thing, just because it's very much a what's your flavor of ice cream kind of class after that, because these guys after Mendoza all have some kind of like, I don't want to say major flaw, because I do think a lot of them can, work on and develop their games, but they do have some kind of con that prohibits them from being a hands-off day 1, day 2 kind of prospect. So how do you feel like this quarterback class is going to go this year, Steve?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and we haven't had a class like this in a while. I mean, think of if you guys do your summer scouting. I mean, coming into the year, I mean, we were thinking about Aller, right? And he probably did not help himself by going back to school this year, but we were talking Aller and Nussmeyer, Cade Klubnik, who we didn't talk about today. I don't really think, he's a great fit for you. But I could be wrong. And then the season starts and we're buzzing about Lenora Sellers. And here we are. And yeah, the season progresses. It's like, oh, Dante Moore, Dante Moore. Well, he goes back to school, and now it's like, oh shit, now what do we do? It's kind of wild. But yeah, I mean, Mendoza's in a class by himself, and I mean, I have Simpson as my quarterback too. It's like, okay, where else am I going to go? I got to pick somebody. Interestingly enough, in the draft professor epic mock that went on over the last couple of days, and I'm not saying that's real life, maybe it mirrors it, maybe it doesn't. Obviously, Mendoza went first to the Raiders, and Simpson didn't go until like almost the tail end of round two. I think it was pick 61 to the Rams, right? Because, oh, you got a quarterback that needs developing. Everybody's like, just send him to Sean McVay. He'll be fine. That's not real life, right? They can't take everybody. And it doesn't even mean that Les Snead and McVay won. But yeah, that's the thing. Obviously, as a Jet fan, there's talk about it. And I don't really think they're going to go that route. I don't think they're going to take him. They do have 2 first-round picks, number 2 and 16. Even if the board gets a little wonky, I don't see them taking him at 16. And I really don't see them trading back in. Um, if he's there with the first pick of the second round at 33, maybe. I could tell you I wouldn't love it. I think he's a great kid. I think there's moments you saw before all the injuries and everything where even if you didn't watch the arm, you watched the footwork, how just surgical and precise he was. It's like, man, is he a Manning or is he a Simpson? I mean, it was really amazing to watch, and just the way he got the ball out. And I don't know. I mean, 15 starts and like 7 of them weren't good. And is it him? Was it the injuries? Because I don't know if this is true or not. And maybe you guys know. Supposedly, there was like something really bad with his back. Like he had a broken vertebrae. And if that's the case, okay, all is forgiven. I mean, my God, how are you still out there?
No kidding.
Um, yeah. So I definitely think Simpson's going to be in that round 2 conversation. I can't say I'll be shocked if it's round 1, but I'd be a little surprised. My number 3, we spoke about him. I've got Cole Payton. Yeah, I'm not big on lefty quarterbacks, but the dude's got something. Joe, you were right. There's like that hitch. I think it's almost more of a dip,
Yeah.
which that could be an issue. But and then number 4, Peyton, I I have a feeling after Simpson at 2, we don't start seeing guys go until round 4. I don't believe that there are teams that are going to be desperate to start, doing, oh, blah, 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 we got to grab this guy. Because, even though it's not a round 1 pick, you, you know, in a draft like this where, we're having your day 2 and day 3 picks matter so much because of the depth of the class, whether receiver or linebacker, safety or whatever. Your general manager, burning a round 3 pick on a quarterback with a lot of questions where, you just let safety XYZ go. And I don't know, your job security may be a little, but I think it's round 4 really where we really start to see, at least that's where I am with Peyton, and Aller and whatever. I think we're gonna have, Jim Wickens is so great about keeping these stats of the average number of quarterbacks drafted, and I think we're gonna flip a lot of things on their ear this draft. I think you're going to have a lot of undrafted quarterbacks, but I want to throw another interesting name. Get your thoughts. We're probably running low on time. I think we did have a
I'm good to
question.
go however long it's Mike with the kids that
Okay. Well, I'll make it quick. What do y'all think about, maybe later on day three, round six, is where I project him? Sawyer Robertson out of Baylor. That to me is an intriguing option, I think, for you guys. When you reached out, Joe, about doing the show, and then, I think it was a few days ago, you told me what we were really going to cover. I'm starting to think, you're just, in the shower doing your shower thoughts, and the light bulb goes on like Sawyer. This could work. So I don't know, what you've watched about him. I think he could be intriguing, but overall, I'm going to tell you, out of any of the guys that, your team, my team can bring on, I don't know that there's any guy that's really going to be, in a crunch, a big improvement over what you might have right now in Ritter. At least he's got the NFL starting experience. It didn't go great, but, I don't know. But did either of you have a chance, or any thoughts on Robertson?
I like his quick release. He has a tight, compact throwing motion. He has a nice ball over the middle of the field. I know that's kind of a weird thing to hear him say, but like I like that he has a decent trajectory. Like his ball doesn't seem to sail over the middle of the field. A little bit of a has to set his feet passer, but that's okay. Like I said, I'm if I can find an alien backup quarterback, that's great. But I just need someone who's gonna come in and know like which way to turn to hand the ball off, or what the call is for shift left for the for the pass protection and things like that. That's another part of it is like like I brought it up when why did they pick Clifford, but it's like they want guys who they're going to have to change as few parts of the offensive infrastructure if this guy has to go in the game. And calling pass protection is one of them. Like you see some of these teams where like, oh, a different quarterback goes in and it's like, oh, now the O-line is calling the pass protection, or God forbid a running back has to call the pass protection and things like that and stuff. You just hear the horror stories about it from every like different coach, and and it always comes out after the season's over because it's like, oh, how come like your offense fell off a cliff? And it's like, oh well, so and so was compensating for this injury, and now like he's not comfortable having to turn his back, kind of thing, and so we're changing how we structure the offense and all that stuff. So like quick aside, that's why I want guys, and it's hard because that's one of those things with college quarterbacks that's so different now is almost none of them call their own plays or make line calls anymore. Like, I do think that's one of the tragedies of where modern college football is gone, with the clap, look at the sideline, see the like 4 giant poster boards, and you pick the like top left corner, bottom right corner, top it's that whole thing, and the color and all that kind of crap. It's like before, like all the quote unquote pro style quarterbacks, they would look to the sideline, get the hand signal, relay the call. Like you go back and watch, like even when Ohio State started to move to the spread, you would see Troy Smith still make the line calls, kind of thing. And like Chad Henne at Michigan, you would see him walk to every one of his O linemen and be like, you got it, we're going to even when they're in the horseshoe and he can't hear jack squat, and it's like, okay, we're audibling and we're going to a dive to the right now and all that kind of stuff. You just don't see that anymore. It's like all these guys, when they clap and look to the sideline, everyone's looking at a different coach, because the receivers are all looking at one signal card, the quarterback's looking at another one, the O-line, whoever's looking for the O-line is looking at a third one. And so, and the NFL is just, I just don't think the NFL is ever going to operate that way. You saw Chip Kelly try to bring some of that, and it just didn't work at all. Like, there's certain elements of, and it's funny because you're in the era where a lot of the guys on offense in the NFL grew up on that style of play, pre-snap structure, but it just has never taken up in the NFL. I don't know if it's the paranoia that the NFL is going to break it better than a college team is going to be able to, whatever it is, but yeah, like that is one of the elements of quarterback transitioning from college to the NFL, where I am always amazed when like a Cam Ward can come in, a guy who played his last 2 seasons at 2 different schools. I know that like Miami had some coach carryover and stuff like that, but is from a full wide open college spread, went to the NFL. It took time over the course of the season, but you could tell, like, yes, he's learning how to run a pro offense. And I know that Tennessee did kind of spoon feed him different elements of it. But then you look at guys like Jordan,
plus
who
they had they got rid of their coach too, who was a play caller. So here you go. I mean, I always compare, like, I think of one of your rivals, the Bears. I mean, I think you guys are a great model because of what you were able to do. You had Brett, you brought Aaron in, you let him sit, and then, you had to make a move. And you did the same thing between Aaron and Jordan. And I think, Mike, I think that reinforces your point. The problem is owners, fans, nobody has patience anymore to do that, right? So here comes Fernando Mendoza, into the NFL, and it's like 1% of his entire college career has been under center. Everything has been left, right, and that's it. I think you hit the nail, absolutely on the head. um yeah, but I always say your rivals, the Bears, if you want to screw up a quarterback, follow what they did, right? Because it was like a wash, rinse, repeat cycle for years. Hire a coach, get a new quarterback, fail the quarterback, get rid of the coach, bring in somebody new, get the new quarterback. And it was a long list. It looks like now, unfortunately for you guys, they may have figured it out with Caleb, but Fields, and we'll see. You know, um, it was Fields, and before him, and the coaches, Eberflus, and I mean, Nagy wasn't bad. He's the only one with a winning record, for God's sakes, and you fired him too. But even, oh God, what was his name? 10,
yeah,
12 years.
the
I can't think of
Canadian
his
League
name.
guy, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
Mark, whatever.
Tressman, yeah, Tressman,
Yeah,
yeah,
Tressman.
the one that right after we smoked him on Sunday night, it's like, well, we had a great week of practice going into the game.
Let me tell you, that is the kiss of death. Every Jet coach uses that, and that's why until we get a coach that stops saying that, we will not have a winning record, gentlemen. We will not.
Yep.
But yeah, just to go back to Sawyer Robertson, I really didn't watch much of him. I know I've heard rumblings about maybe Packers being interested, but looking at his Raz card, I think the only thing that will maybe hurt him for the Packers is he scored poorly on his agility, and that could be something that, because Mike, and I'm not just saying this as a weird thing, is the Packers really do look at their agility stuff when it comes to all their players. Now, they have taken some guys in the past that have at least had orange in their agility, but I don't know with as deep red as it is for Sawyer Robinson if that's going to be, unless it's like a 7th round or a UDFA type guy.
Yeah.
But I have a couple more. How you doing on time, Mike?
I think I'm good for another 15.
Okay. So I did really try to look at some later round guys. It's kind of funny, Steve, that you mentioned that you don't really do NFL comps. Well, I always tell people I don't do pick things for players. I don't guess what round they're going to go in or whatever. I look at a guy and, hey, I kind of like that guy, and go from there on them. So some of these guys may not get drafted. Some of them may go in a spot that just don't, the Packers wouldn't be in. But the first one that I really liked, but the problem is he's a bit of an old, is Haynes King out of Georgia Tech. Athletic, scrambler. He has good size to him. I thought his arm strength was a little average. You could see where, maybe with better footwork he could build up that arm strength, but he often he pulled the Love thing where he often throws off of the wrong foot time after time. So you wonder if maybe a little work on that or whatever. His bread and butter though was throwing on the run and scrambling, and I thought his arm strength when throwing a speed ball or a fastball if you want to get into baseball talk a little bit, was tremendous. It was kind of, it kind of, not say to comp him to Brett Favre, but it kind of had reminiscence of those times with those types of fastballs, because you would see the receiver's hand like go from the catch spot to like 2 yards back because they were trying to cushion the ball to come into him with him, and I thought that was really good. Like I said, I think he's 24, 25, so I don't know if that's the type that would be more of a Sean Clifford type of draft pick than a bring him in, groom him, trade him type deal. And then the other one that I like that is really athletic is Jeff Sims out of Arizona State. Again, athletic, scrambler. He's got a short throwing motion, which I kind of like, because, you know, the when I was watching him, again, not to do comps or anything, but visions of like Vince Young, because they had the same type of build, but they also had that throwing motion that it started back behind, but when he would start shortening up his throwing motion, his accuracy went better. So if somebody can get in there and work with him and work on his throwing motion a little bit, and have it a little bit more steady, I think he'll be fine. One of his problems maybe is he's got like super long arms, so you know that could be what hinders him with the throwing motion. But he does also have pretty good with the multiple arm angles, kind of like we talked about with Malik, where he could throw it from, you know, whatever motion he needed to go, or whatever arm angle he needed to go to. But that, if I would have to say, he's probably a preferred UDFA more than anything, just basically because of his athletic traits. So we talked about Baron Morton a little bit. I'm not going to get into Diego Pavia. I did watch him. I know the Packers met with him. I don't know about anything with him. You know, not strongest arm, short, all that good stuff with him. I did watch Klubnik. The only reason I watched him is because I don't know if you know Brian Maffey, but Maffey talks about him quite a bit. So, and he says that could be a sleeper for maybe a Packers pick. But yep, because this is our show and because we are homers for our college teams, I do have to bring up Mark Gronowski. I'm a Hawkeyes fan, obviously, with the Iowa Joe moniker. I have been, and this could just be sour grapes because of how shitty the offense has been for the longest time for the Hawkeyes. I'm not sold on Gronowski. I've looked at his stats. He played better at South Dakota State than he did with the University of Iowa.
Yeah.
I know what one of the main problems is, and that's a head coach that is very old school and doesn't like trying to involve too much newer school methods. And this is case in point. Mark Gronowski had 262 passing attempts for the University of Iowa this past season. He had 130 rushing carries for the University of Iowa. He had 545 rushing yards, and that was the most since his freshman season with South Dakota State, which was 577 yards. He had only 1,741 passing yards, and that was the least since his freshman year at South Dakota State, where he had 1,500 passing yards. So I do know the big thing for him was the use at the University of Iowa. I'm not sure why he decided to come to Iowa. I know they offered him. I think what I was told was he was looking for $3 million for his NIL, and the Hawkeyes gave him $3 million for his NIL. Maybe they were the only ones that were offering it to him. I don't know that part of it. But when you look through the stats, you can see that he would have been better off coming out in the 2025 draft than the 2026, because all his stuff looks better when he was with South Dakota State. With that being said, he does have a decent arm. He does have decent strength. He has a good over the top motion. He is a one look reader or thrower. He has a hard time reading his targets. So if it's not there on the first one, then he does struggle with that a little bit. And again, that could just be because of the University of Iowa. I don't know. I do know, but nothing's going to happen on that front for a while. But I do have this piece of information that I did get from a reputable source that coaches at the University of Iowa were wanting to bench Gronowski mid-season. But Ferentz nixed it and said, no, we're staying with him. And honestly, that's a typical Ferentz thing where Ferentz doesn't like to change anything. He will ride with a person until he cannot ride with them anymore. So again, you know, as much as I hate to say it, I think coming to the University of Iowa really hurt Mark Gronowski's stock. If somebody can, the big problem is he's going to be another older prospect, because this was his year 5 in college football. So he's going to be a bit older when he gets into the NFL. If somebody thinks they can do something with him, he's got the aspects there that he can do it. But if he really wants to make an NFL team with his ability, because I've said when he ran, he with his size and the way he ran, he kind of reminded me of Ben Roethlisberger's scrambles. He's not like the fastest out on the field, but he's a tough runner, and he's able to do a lot of those things. He might be better off trying to make the transition to a tight end than being a quarterback in the league, unless, like I said, somebody can really work with him and think that, you know, he only needs a year or two before being some kind of starter. And
I'm glad you brought. I'm glad you brought those guys up. I don't really have much to add on Jeff Sims. I mean, you know, I watch a little bit just out of, you know, scouting Jordan Tyson, right? So, you know, you kind of draw into that. But I'll start on Gronowski. You know, you mentioned the South Dakota State. So, you know, both the FCS, FBS experience. You know, I think you hit all the good points, right? The size is there. I would say he's definitely a sturdy guy. You know, he understands timing and rhythm. His mechanics are decent. Excuse me. He's efficient, you know, with the ball in his hands. And then, you know, I think there's some pop on the short throws. It begins to start to wane on the intermediate and the deep. He definitely struggled at times with accuracy at Iowa. I think it was a little more accurate at SDSU. You mentioned he's an older prospect, but I think he has more confidence in his arm than his arm actually has, you know, if that makes any sense. So, you know, I don't think I like I said, I think he's got that sturdy build. I just don't think he's a dynamic runner. So, you know, I think, you know, undrafted or whatever. I don't love the idea, you know, when we start talking about changing position. I kind of, you know, want to see what they got, but ultimately, you know, the league knows more than me. And yeah, you know, I completely forgot, you know, to talk about Haynes King, one of our, you know, colleagues in this draft space, really, really eloquent and smart guy by the name of Bill Carroll. He really is high on King. You know, he moved around. He didn't find his footing, you know, and he transferred and wound up, you know, in Atlanta, Georgia Tech. I mean, one of the key things outside of Jaden Daniels, he's like literally the only P5 quarterback to have more than 2,800 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, and I forget the exact rushing number. It may be 700 and maybe 800 with a ton of rushing touchdowns. I think it was 10. So really interesting. I mean, all ACC, He was a track and field guy. Like you said, you know, he's clutch and electric as a runner. He's got good twitch to him. Man, he's got a rocket arm. He knows how, to take off when something breaks down. I think he's still got a lot to learn about reading defenses. My concern is he is a little lean. So, I think whoever it was we were talking about before, when Mike was saying about just putting, a pounding on the guy, that's kind of what I think of, for his size to be. I don't know. I don't remember offhand. I don't have the numbers. If he's, 210, maybe a
212,
little
I
under.
think, is what he got measured in at.
Okay, so it's better than I actually thought. But like I said, the mechanics tend to go a little wonky under pressure. But the speed, and whereas with a lot of these guys, we talk about the short and intermediate. His long ball, which obviously is not the NFL, right? That's backyard football. Run to the lamppost and I'll throw it to you. That's not the NFL. It's more in that 5 to 15, 5 to 10 range. But he's an exciting player, and I'm glad you brought him up.
Yeah, very much so. And I really did like what I saw out of him. I just wish he was a couple years younger, and you could see him really grow in the NFL. Not saying that he doesn't have years ahead of him, just saying that, if he needs work, then there's not a lot of time to work with him. So
Yeah. Steve made the big point on King. He's a fun watch, and I do like Steve said, I do think there's more arm talent in him that he's shown, partly because of what Georgia Tech's offense is. Because there's a lot of, half his highlight film is of him running the ball out of like a triple option look. But he's got a live enough arm, and the main thing is he's a competitor. Like he is a fiery competitor, and it is one of those intangibles that you do like to see out of like a later round prospect, especially one who you're not expected to be your starter. And Steve's right though, like he's not a big guy, and Georgia Tech put an absolute load of their offensive production on his shoulders. And it was always kind of sad because you could kind of tell what part of the season and even what part of a game it was, because you could kind of tell, like, just watching him on a, like, if you just saw like a random snap of him, you're like, oh, that's the first quarter, because, like, obviously the jersey's clean and all that kind of stuff, but, like, his movements look a little explosive, there's some pep to his step, and then, like, oh, that's a late November quarter 4 snap, because he's kind of haggard, he's dragging a little, like there's maybe some blood on the uniform and stuff like that. But he was a lot of fun to watch in college because, you could definitely tell when, like, mentally he was a little bit out of it, because he would start to make, like, he's generally pretty good with the ball, but every once in a while he'd have those like, how did you not see that guy? And I'm like, I just think he just started to play off instinct and is not expecting someone to be there in that throwing window kind of turnover. So good fun. And then honestly, Jeff Sims, I had to double check when Joe brought him up, because I was like, wait, that Jeff Sims, like the guy who started at Georgia Tech before Haynes King, Jeff Sims? And I was like, God, I remember when he transferred to Nebraska and when that went up in flames kind of thing. So I'm like, oh, yeah, he is still in college. I just had to look to make sure. I was like, that is the same one still, but
athletic as hell. I mean, like I said, I don't think he's going to be, unless some team really is desperate to draft him, I don't think he's going to get drafted, but athletic as hell, and that arm was something else because it was effortless for him to throw. So
yeah, you're right. He has those long arms, and it's like a whip. He's like cracking a whip when he throws the ball. Well,
you remember when Vince Young would throw it, and a buddy of mine would talk about it when he signed with the Packers for those 2 weeks. He would like have to bring his arm all the way back behind his shoulder and release it, and that's kind of what it seems like Jeff Sims has to do, because of those long arms. So
he's kind of Cunningham-ish in that way. Yeah, it's sort of Randall Cunningham-ish in that way. But
before we end, we do have Moose's question that we got to get to, and then we'll call it good and get us out of here. But Goose _MN always sends in these questions. that has to do with what Packer would we choose from the past. So this time, because we're talking quarterbacks, he asked, if you could grab a backup QB from a Packers team between 2000 and 2020, who would your pick? Who would be your pick to back up Love? So of course I had to go through and verify what he meant by it. So I asked him someone who was a backup QB for the Packers between those years, and would we get them as they were as a backup, or I gave the example like Matt Flynn starting, or is he Matt Flynn when he was a rookie? And he said as they were as a backup, so obviously Rodgers is off the board. So I'll let you guys do it because I got to look up one thing real quick. Who would your backup be from the Packers between 2020 and or 2000 and 2020?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I actually almost slipped in getting ready for this. I almost said Hasselbeck, but he was. I think that was around the cutoff.
Yeah, just before.
I think Goose really knew how to phrase it so that I wouldn't say it. I mean, in thinking of all the names, by the way, don't worry, I'm not going to say Tim Boyle. With all due respect to the mad tweeter, Kurt Benkert, I'm not going to say him. Seneca Wallace is out the door. But yeah, for me, I think, and it's a difficult question, right? Because we know what happened. Matt Flynn used that to get a hell of a deal. I mean, that was ridiculous money, what he got in 2012 from Pete Carroll and the Seahawks. And then they go and draft a guy in the third round out of Wisconsin who winds up beating out not only Matt Flynn, but Tavares Jackson. So I guess for me, it would be Matt Flynn. I guess another intriguing name that I thought about was going to be Brett Huntley, but I would probably say Flynn first, and then Huntley is way down here. But yeah,
I have bad memories of Huntley because the year Rodgers broke his collarbone against Minnesota, I had bought tickets for the Saints game, and this was before Rodgers got hurt. And the game before the Saints game was the Minnesota game that Rodgers got hurt. So the first game that I was in Lambeau Field to watch that year was the Brett Hundley absolute masterclass of what not to do when you're backing up and having to start. So, Matt Flynn would be a good one, but it would definitely have to be his rookie or as he was the first time around when he was a backup, because yes, he did have that wonderful 6 touchdown game against Detroit and all that stuff, but after he left Green Bay is when he had arm problems. He already had a weak arm going into it, and then when he went to Seattle, he injured it, and then when he came back again and for the Packers, you could tell that arm got even weaker, and that was hard to deal with him. But Matt Flynn would be an amazing one. Mike, I'll let you go ahead.
I'm gonna cheat. No. I was gonna say I'm gonna cheat, but I realize it's after 2020. I'm gonna go with.
Would Doug Peterson fall into it? I guess.
think he technically would. That's so funny. He technically would because he came back in 2004. But you know what? Just for the vibes, I'm gonna go with the quarterback school. I'm gonna go with JT O'Sullivan. We'll give JT O'Sullivan a shout out. I can't say I remember anything spectacular about his career. I just remember his name, and I love all the work he does. Yeah, just he was a journeyman. I think he played for like 10 teams and stuff, but really like all the work he does breaking down film and and all of the the work he does to like inform the average fan on quarterback play and stuff. And so I'll give him his flowers in that way by picking him in this hypothetical pick your backup quarterback. Obviously, he has it between the ears.
He does do great work, though. He does do great work. Yeah.
And like I'm picking him to be that guy holding the clipboard, making the the backup calls with the headset on kind of thing. And you can just see it. Like he obviously knows his stuff inside out, understands this stuff. And I just like the personal touch where he just goes like, yeah, when I was in Green Bay, we called it this. Not sure if they still do, but hey, that's how it was. Like, I love those little tidbits when he puts it in the video. So, yeah, I'll give JT his flowers right now.
And you remember the days like, we talk about the money that guys like Chase Daniel made, just holding a clipboard, oh, it's a cushy job. And I guess that circles back to the importance of the conversation we had tonight, because over the last 3 seasons, we are definitely over 60. I think it's 62 quarterbacks have played on average the last 3 years. You got to have, just like, teams focused on left tackle years ago. Now they know, well, we better have a good right one. Well, now you better have a good backup, because there's a good chance, your backup is going to have to come in.
Yep. Just so many different variables, added games, all that kind of stuff. Like, it's the NFL, shit happens, and you got to have a plan.
Yep.
So Steve mentioned this name, and this is why I had to let you guys go first, because I had to look it up. And Matt Hasselbeck was with the Packers in 2000.
He was.
So I'm looking at his Pro Football Reference, and he was 10 for 19 for 104 yards and 1 touchdown in 2000 for the Packers. So
that's right.
That was that's why I had to look it up, and then Steve said it, and I was like, do I go look for something else? Because I had it in my mind that he wasn't there either.
I didn't think he was. Okay, yeah.
But yeah, according to Pro Football Reference, 99 and 2000 is when he spent his years in Green Bay before getting shipped out famously for Amon Green with Seattle. But if I had to go anyone, it would be Hasselbeck. I know and I know Goose said, obviously that leaves out Rodgers, but I don't think it does, because I would still take a young Rodgers to back up, because you're not expecting him to start right away. It's just if somebody goes down, if Jordan Love were to go down, you have that guy in case. Well, we know what Rodgers is. Rodgers is a smart guy. Rodgers is an athletic guy. He's got the ability. So give me a young Rodgers behind Love any day of the week, and then maybe we can clone him. Rodgers is a little bit of wackadoo with that stuff, so we clone Rodgers, let him sit behind Love. In 10 years, we'll send Love to the Jets. We'll go back to Rodgers, and then 20 years later, we'll send Rodgers again to the Jets. And we'll just keep going with the cycle.
I mean, even Matt Flynn was a Jet for a very hot minute. Like, we are so in tune with our quarterbacks. It's I can't even call it sloppy seconds though.
But yes, that would be my guy. Or I would have to throw Craig Nall in there as an honorable mention, because he was a longtime Packer. And just to affirm what you said, Doug Peterson did come back for a little stint after 2000, so he would be in consideration there. But side note on that, I wasn't a big fan of him when he was with the Packers, so I wouldn't have chose him anyway.
And on that note, we'll put a capper on this episode. We've had a lot of fun here. Steve, thank you so much for joining us to talk quarterbacks. I know we've kind of dabbled in it, but please let everyone know where they can find all your work on the draft or any other NFL writing you do.
Yeah, so the easiest way is just hop on over to, I can't call it X. I got to call it Twitter.
Yep, we do too.
You can see it. Oop, where is it? There it is. I found it. Right there, at Steve_NFL. That's also the handle for my YouTube channel. The Substack has been coming out, not as frequently as I'd like, because, with all the podcast stuff, I would like the time to write more. But yeah, that's the center of the universe. So just follow me along there.
Awesome. Like I
Thanks
said,
for
thank you so
having me, guys.
much for joining.
No, I
thank you so much for joining
great.
us. And Please follow us on your on Twitter at Ohana_Packers, at Ohana Packers Edition on Instagram. We are still trying to get to 100 followers on Facebook, so that we can, when we do our day 2 live stream, we can live stream both on YouTube and there on Facebook. So please get us there. We're gonna do our drawing whenever we get to 100 followers. So please help us out, help you out if you are the one who wins it. Please follow the podcast on your favorite podcasting apps. Please give us a like and a subscribe. And yeah, if you want your question read out on the show, please put it in. We're always happy to, so long as it's within the bounds of decent human being work. And otherwise, thank you again, Steve. Go Pack Go, and aloha.
Packers fans out here to stay. Cheeseheads green and gold all day. Jordan Love lead us to the bay. Every game we find a way. Green Bay hustle, grind it up. Hit the field, we don't bluff. Touchdown dances, feel the love. Jordan's got that MVP stuff. It's time for let's go. Packers bringing that show. It's time for you know. Green and gold gonna glow. Lambeau Field, our sacred ground. Feel the vibe, hear the sound. Packers fans so loud and proud. Jordan Love, he's wearing the crown. Lambeau Field, our sacred ground. Feel the vibe, hear the sound. Packers fans so loud and proud. Jordan Love, he's wearing the crown.